What could make Johnny Carson, the king of cool, the master of composed wit, completely break down on live television? Why did Buddy Hackett stop mid-joke and do something no guest had ever done before? And what secret letter did Johnny receive just hours before this interview that changed everything? Stay with me, because what happened next in front of 28 million viewers would become the most important moment in late-night history. I see messages all the time that some of you didn't realize you weren't subscribed. If you could double-check and subscribe if you haven't already, that would mean the world to us. It's free, it's simple, and it helps keep this show going. You're part of our history, and on this journey with us, thank you. When Johnny Carson broke down laughing so hard he couldn't breathe, the Tonight Show cameras kept rolling. But what happened after the commercial break when Buddy Hackett whispered something in Johnny's ear changed everything. The king of late night would later say it was the most important moment in 30 years of television. What could possibly make Johnny Carson forget every rule he'd built his career on? October 3, 1978, 5:47 p.m., NBC Studios in Burbank, California. The Tonight Show was less than an hour from taping. Johnny Carson sat alone in his dressing room, staring at a letter he'd received that morning. His hands were shaking, not from nerves. Johnny never got nervous before a show. This was something else entirely. The letter was from his younger sister, Catherine. 3 pages, handwritten, delivered by courier that afternoon. She was dying. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors had given her 6 weeks, maybe less, and she had written to tell Johnny something she'd kept secret for 43 years, a secret about the night their father left, a secret about why Johnny had spent his entire life afraid to let anyone see who he really was. Catherine wrote, "You've spent your whole life hiding, John, performing instead of living, making everyone laugh so they wouldn't see how lonely you are, but I'm running out of time, and I can't leave this world without telling you the truth about that night. It wasn't your fault, it was never your fault, and you don't have to keep punishing yourself by staying alone." Johnny folded the letter carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket, right over his heart. His stage manager knocked on the door. 20 minutes, Johnny. Buddy Hackett's already in makeup. He's asking for you." Buddy Hackett, one of the funniest men alive, a comedian's comedian, someone who could make Johnny laugh harder than anyone else in show business. But tonight, Johnny wasn't sure he could laugh at all. What Johnny didn't know was that Buddy Hackett had received his own phone call earlier that day. A phone call that would collide with Johnny's secret in the most unexpected way possible. The studio audience filed into their seats at 6:05 p.m., buzzing with anticipation. Buddy Hackett was legendary on The Tonight Show. He'd appeared over 60 times, and every single appearance was comedy gold. The man could turn a simple story about buying groceries into a 20-minute masterpiece that left audiences gasping for air. But tonight felt different. The crew sensed it. Ed McMahon sensed it. Even Doc Severinsen and his orchestra felt the strange tension in the air as they warmed up. Johnny walked onto the stage at exactly 6:30 p.m. for the pre-show warm-up. He smiled at the audience, cracked a few jokes about the gas shortage and President Carter's approval ratings. His timing was perfect as always. His delivery was flawless. But if you looked closely, really closely, you could see something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a kind of desperate sadness that no amount of professional polish could completely hide. Backstage in the green room, Buddy Hackett sat alone, which was unusual. Buddy was always surrounded by people. He collected conversations the way other people collected stamps. He'd talk to anyone about anything, stagehand, producer, cleaning crew, didn't matter. But right now, Buddy was staring at his own hands with an expression that his manager, who'd known him for 27 years, had never seen before. "Buddy, you okay?" the manager asked quietly. Buddy looked up. His famous round face, usually lit with mischief and joy, looked older somehow. Tired. "My brother called this morning," Buddy said softly. "Leonard. He's in the hospital. They found something." The manager's face went pale. "What kind of something?" "The bad kind." Buddy's voice cracked slightly. "He asked me to come see him tomorrow. Said he needs to tell me something before." "Buddy, we can cancel tonight," Johnny would understand. But Buddy shook his head firmly. "No. Leonard told me to do the show. He said, go make people laugh, Buddy. That's what you do. That's who you are. Don't stop being who you are because I'm dying." He wiped his eyes quickly. "So that's what I'm going to do. What neither Johnny nor Buddy knew was that their separate griefs were about to crash into each other on live television in front of 28 million people. And what would happen next would change both their lives forever. At 7:30 p.m., Johnny Carson walked through that famous curtain to the sound of Johnny's theme and the roar of 300 people on their feet. He waved, he smiled, he sat behind his desk and picked up his blue cards for the monologue. For 11 minutes, Johnny was brilliant. Jokes about inflation, about the upcoming midterm elections, about a bear that had wandered into a shopping mall in Colorado. The audience howled. Ed McMahon's famous laugh boomed across the studio. Everything was working perfectly. But you have not seen the biggest surprise yet. During the commercial break before the first guest, something happened that the cameras didn't catch. Johnny reached into his jacket pocket and touched his sister's letter, just for a moment, just long enough for Ed McMahon to notice. "Johnny?" Ed leaned over, concerned. "You okay, pal?" Johnny pulled his hand away quickly. "I'm fine, Ed. Just fine." But Ed had worked with Johnny for 16 years. He knew when his friend was lying. He also knew better than to push. Johnny Carson's walls were thick and high for a reason. Getting him to open up about real feelings was like trying to crack a safe with a toothpick. At 7:49 p.m., Ed McMahon's voice boomed through the studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, one of the funniest men on the planet, please welcome the hilarious Buddy Hackett." The audience erupted. Buddy came through the curtain doing his signature waddle walk, arms pumping, that enormous smile lighting up his face like a sunrise. He shook Johnny's hand, waved at the audience, and settled into the guest chair. For the first 8 minutes, everything was perfect. Buddy told a story about trying to buy a waterbed and flooding his entire house. He did impressions of his wife yelling at him in Yiddish. He made Johnny laugh, that real Johnny laugh, not the professional one, but the genuine one, where his whole face transformed. The audience was in heaven. This was what they came for. This was magic. Then Buddy started telling a story about his childhood, about growing up in Brooklyn in the 1930s, about his father, who worked in the upholstery business and barely spoke English, about how hard his mother worked to keep the family together. "My old man," Buddy said, his voice softening. "He wasn't good at saying he loved us. You know what I mean? That generation, they showed love by putting food on the table and keeping the lights on. But telling you, hugging you, that wasn't in their vocabulary." Johnny's smile faded slightly. His hand moved unconsciously toward his jacket pocket again. Buddy continued, not noticing the shift in Johnny's expression. "I remember one night, I must have been maybe 9 years old. My father came home from work and he looked exhausted, just beaten down by life, you know. And I wanted to tell him something. I wanted to tell him that I loved him, that I thought he was doing a good job, that I appreciated everything he was doing for us." The audience was completely silent now. This wasn't a setup for a joke. This was something else entirely. "But I couldn't say it," Buddy said quietly. "The words got stuck in my throat. And you know what? I never did tell him. He died in 1952, and I never once told my father I loved him." Buddy's eyes were wet. The studio held its breath. And this is exactly where everything changed. Johnny Carson, the man who had perfected the art of emotional distance on television, who had done over 4,000 episodes without ever revealing anything truly personal, reached across his desk and took Buddy Hackett's hand. The camera zoomed in, capturing something that had never happened before on The Tonight Show. Johnny's eyes were filling with tears. "Buddy," Johnny said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I know exactly what you mean." The audience didn't move. Even the crew in the control room stopped breathing. "My father left when I was 8 years old," Johnny continued. Words he'd never spoken publicly before. "Just packed a bag one night and walked out. No explanation, no goodbye. And for my entire life I thought it was because of me. I thought I wasn't good enough. I thought if I'd been funnier or smarter or different somehow, maybe he would have stayed." Buddy squeezed Johnny's hand. He wasn't performing anymore. Neither of them were. "I got a letter from my sister today," Johnny said, his voice cracking. "She's dying, cancer, and she told me the truth about that night. She told me why he really left, and it had nothing to do with me. But I've spent 40 years building walls, 40 years making people laugh so they wouldn't see how scared I was of letting anyone close, 40 years proving I was worthy of love by never letting anyone actually love me." The studio was completely silent except for the sound of people crying. Not just the audience, the cameramen, the stage crew, Ed McMahon sitting behind his desk with tears streaming down his face. Wait, do not miss this detail. Buddy Hackett did something then that no guest had ever done on The Tonight Show. He stood up, walked around Johnny's desk, and wrapped his arms around his friend. On live television in front of millions of people, Buddy Hackett hugged Johnny Carson while they both cried. "Johnny," Buddy whispered, but loud enough for the microphones to catch, "you listen to me. Your father leaving wasn't about you not being enough. My father dying without hearing me say I love him wasn't about me not being brave enough. Life breaks our hearts in ways we can't control, but we get to choose what we do with the broken pieces." Johnny pulled back slightly, looking at Buddy through his tears. "What do we do with them?" Buddy smiled, that enormous, genuine Buddy Hackett smile. "We use them to connect with other people who are broken. We stop pretending we're okay all the time. We let people see us, really see us, and we tell the truth even when it's scary." Johnny nodded slowly. Then he did something unprecedented. He turned to the camera and spoke directly to America. "I've been hosting this show for 16 years, Johnny said, and I've interviewed thousands of people. Presidents, movie stars, athletes, comedians, musicians. I've laughed with you every night. I've tried my best to make your days a little brighter before you went to sleep. But I've never told you the truth about who I really am." He took a shaky breath. "I'm lonely. I've been lonely my entire adult life. I've had 3 marriages fail because I couldn't let anyone pass the walls I built. I've missed my sons growing up because I was more comfortable here, behind this desk, than I was at home being a father. And tonight my friend Buddy reminded me that hiding isn't the same as healing." The audience began to applaud, softly at first, then louder. They weren't applauding a performance, they were applauding courage. But you will not believe what happened next. During the commercial break, something extraordinary occurred. The NBC switchboard lit up like a Christmas tree. Not with complaints, not with confusion, with calls from people wanting to share their own stories. Veterans calling to say they'd never told their families about their trauma. Parents calling to say they'd been hiding depression for years. Spouses calling to say they'd never admitted their marriages were falling apart. When the show came back from commercial, Johnny made a decision that shocked his producers. He canceled the rest of the planned show. No other guests, no comedy bits. Just Johnny and Buddy, talking about fathers and sons, about fear and vulnerability, about the walls we build and the courage it takes to tear them down. For 43 uninterrupted minutes, American television became something it had rarely been before, honest. Buddy told Johnny about his brother Leonard's phone call, about how he'd been planning to do his usual shtick tonight, to hide behind the jokes and the characters because that's what he always did when life hurt too much. "But watching you just now," Buddy said, "having the guts to tell the truth in front of all these people, Johnny, you gave me permission to stop pretending too. And you know what? It feels better than any laugh I've ever gotten." Johnny smiled, a real smile, not his professional one. "What are you going to tell Leonard tomorrow?" "The truth," Buddy said simply. "That I love him, that I'm scared of losing him, that I wish I'd been a better brother. All the things I've been too afraid to say." "And what do you think he'll say back?" Buddy's eyes filled with tears again. "I think he'll say he always knew. I think he'll say that brothers don't need perfect words, they just need to show up. And I think he'll tell me to keep making people laugh because that's how I show love to the world. What you have seen so far is nothing compared to what happened after that broadcast ended." When the cameras stopped rolling at 9:13 p.m., Johnny and Buddy sat on that stage for another 20 minutes, just talking. The audience didn't leave. They stayed in their seats, witnessing something sacred. Finally, Johnny stood up. He walked to the front of the stage and looked out at the 300 people who had watched him crack open. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for letting me be human tonight." A woman in the third row stood up. "Mr. Carson, my husband died 3 months ago, and I haven't cried once. I've been holding it in, trying to be strong for my kids. But watching you tonight, thank you for showing me it's okay to break down." A man in the back raised his hand. "I haven't spoken to my son in 7 years. We had a fight about something stupid, and both of us were too proud to apologize. I'm calling him tonight. One by one, people shared their own stories. The taping had ended, but nobody wanted to leave. They'd come for entertainment and found something more valuable: permission to be vulnerable. The episode aired on October 3, 1978 at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time. By midnight, NBC's phone lines were overwhelmed. By morning, every major newspaper in America had run a story about Johnny Carson's emotional breakdown. By the end of the week, the network had received over 200,000 letters. But here's what most people never knew about what happened next. Johnny Carson flew to Des Moines, Iowa, the very next morning to see his sister Catherine. He held her hand for 6 hours straight and told her everything he'd never said about his failed marriages, about his sons, about the loneliness that had followed him like a shadow for 4 decades. Catherine, weak from cancer but sharp as ever, smiled at her brother. "You finally did it, John. You finally let yourself be seen." "I was so scared," Johnny admitted. "I thought if people saw the real me, they'd realize I wasn't worth their time." "And what did you find out?" Johnny thought about the letters pouring into NBC, about the phone calls from people thanking him for his honesty, about Buddy Hackett's hug and the audience that had stayed long after the camera stopped rolling. "I found out that being perfect is lonely," Johnny said, "but being real connects you to everyone." Catherine squeezed his hand. "Better late than never, little brother." Buddy Hackett visited his brother Leonard the morning after the taping. He sat beside Leonard's hospital bed and said all the things he'd been afraid to say for 60 years. Leonard held Buddy's hand and cried and told him he'd always known that brothers don't need perfect words, that love doesn't require performance. Leonard passed away 3 weeks later. At his funeral, Buddy stood up and told everyone about the Tonight Show episode, about how Johnny Carson's courage had given him permission to stop hiding, about how that last conversation with his brother was the most important moment of his entire life. "Johnny Carson saved my relationship with my brother," Buddy said through his tears, "not by making me laugh, but by showing me it was okay to cry." The October 3rd episode became one of the most requested shows in Tonight Show history. NBC re-aired it 3 times. Universities used it in psychology classes to demonstrate authentic vulnerability. Therapists showed clips to patients struggling with emotional intimacy. Johnny Carson never went back to his old way of hosting. Oh, he still told jokes, he still made America laugh. But now, mixed in with the comedy, there were moments of genuine connection. When a guest shared something real, Johnny didn't deflect with humor. He leaned in, he listened, he responded with his own truth. His ratings didn't suffer. If anything, they improved. Audiences loved this version of Johnny even more, the one who could be funny and vulnerable, entertaining and honest, professional and deeply, beautifully human. In his final episode in 1992, 14 years after that night with Buddy Hackett, Johnny referenced it directly. "A lot of people ask me about my favorite Tonight Show moments," Johnny said. "They expect me to talk about interviewing presidents or hosting huge stars. But my favorite moment was the night Buddy Hackett and I stopped performing and started being real with each other. That night taught me that the walls we build to protect ourselves end up being the prisons we can't escape, and the only way out is to have the courage to be vulnerable." He paused, his eyes glistening. "So if there's someone in your life you've been hiding from, someone you've been afraid to be honest with, someone you love but have never told, do it tomorrow, do it tonight, do it right now. Because I wasted 40 years being afraid, and I'll never get that time back." Buddy Hackett appeared on The Tonight Show 17 more times before Johnny retired. Every single appearance, at some point, Buddy would catch Johnny's eye and give him a small nod, a silent reminder of the night they'd torn down their walls together. When Buddy passed away in 2003, Johnny Carson came out of retirement to speak at his funeral. He was rarely seen in public by then, but this was different. This was family. "Buddy Hackett made me laugh harder than anyone I ever met," Johnny told the assembled crowd. "But that's not what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful that he showed me how to be brave. I'm grateful that he demonstrated that real strength isn't about hiding your feelings. It's about having the courage to share them. I'm grateful that on one October night in 1978, he gave me permission to stop being Johnny Carson, the performer, and start being John, the human being." Today, that episode is preserved in the Library of Congress as a cultural artifact. Mental health professionals still reference it, communication students study it, and millions of people who watched it that night or have seen it since say it changed their lives. Not because it was funny, though. Buddy Hackett remained one of the funniest men who ever lived. Not because it was entertaining, though it held 28 million viewers captivated for an hour. But because two men decided that one night in front of the entire country they would stop hiding. They would tell the truth about fear and loneliness and the walls we build. They would show America that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the most courageous thing we can offer each other. Johnny Carson died in 2005. Among his personal belongings, his sons found a letter he'd written but never sent. It was addressed to Buddy Hackett, dated October 4, 1978, the day after that famous episode. The letter said simply, "Thank you for saving my life. Thank you for showing me that being seen is worth the risk of being hurt. Thank you for being the kind of friend who loves people enough to tell them the truth. I will never forget what you gave me that night. You gave me permission to be human, John." The night Buddy Hackett made Johnny Carson break his own rules wasn't just a moment of great television. It was a moment that proved something essential about being human. We're all carrying secrets, all building walls, all afraid that if people see who we really are, they'll turn away. But the truth is exactly the opposite. When we have the courage to be vulnerable, to admit our fears, to share our pain, we don't push people away. We pull them closer. We give them permission to stop pretending too. We remind them that being broken isn't something to hide, it's something to share. Because in the end, we're all broken in different ways, and the only thing that heals us isn't perfection, it's connection. If this story moved you, take a moment right now to think about someone in your life you've been hiding from, someone you love but haven't told, someone who needs to see the real you, walls down, honest and scared and beautifully human. Don't wait. Don't let fear win. Don't waste years pretending you're okay when you're not. Call them, text them, show up at their door. Tell them the truth. Because 40 years from now, you won't regret being vulnerable. You'll only regret the love you were too afraid to share. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your location in the comments. And if you've ever hidden your real feelings behind a smile, if you've ever been afraid to let someone see you completely, you're not alone. Johnny Carson and Buddy Hackett showed us that even legends get scared. Even the funniest people carry pain. Even the most successful among us are just humans trying to figure out how to love and be loved. Subscribe for more true stories about the moments that changed television and changed lives. Share this with someone who needs permission to be vulnerable today. And remember, the bravest thing you can do isn't to hide your broken pieces. It's to let someone see them. That's when the real healing begins.